Let's get some hands together, gang, for Gideon AI.
Well, there's been a lot of testing since Classic launched, and I think we can properly analyze how that turned out for a few odd builds. We're going to be talking specifically about these weird builds. There are other odd builds I will not be covering in this video due to a personal lack of information. If you can share any information on these builds with me, then that would be greatly appreciated. As always, the comments section is open to all. Just a little disclaimer, I haven't tested most of these personally, so some of this information is second-hand. Timestamps are in the description. First up, the Spell Hunter / Arcane Hunter. It does what it says on the tin. It's useful for some niche AoE farming and good in PvP against high armor foes while affording greater mobility to the player, though we already expected it to turn out this way due to the large body of 2005 to 2006 era research on the subject. There were hopes that certain weapons would have procs that scaled with spell damage, or that there would be unknown mechanics that could be abused to give spell hunters an edge in PvE. Sadly, it seems that none of those came true. Although there's still a vague possibility of some new melee spell hunter shenanigans with the proc batching and all that jazz, but that's still very far removed from the traditional spell hunter in the ranged form. Hunter Pet Dungeon Tanks. Punishing for uncoordinated groups, and limited too much by party threat to be worth using alongside hardcore DPS, but effective at certain level blocks based on Screech availability, and also decent in groups of casual fresh 60s. I'm still going to make a full video on that. As for the Arcane Priest, turns out it's still an alright leveling build, especially if you want to keep up with party members that don't like waiting for mana drinking. However, at max level, Star Shards is considered to be a utility button for healers only, to cash in on a bit more damage than wands are capable of, while not breaking the mana bank on smites. Personally, I don't think it can be pushed farther than that, despite the recent discovery that you can melee while channeling the ability. As for the dungeon healing build that revolves around spamming rank 1 Holy Nova, it's really good if you use a talent build for it and get a bunch of spell damage gear, but kind of trash in regular healing gear. It's still much funner than just wanding, and I'll be doing a full video on this soon. For the Undead Melee Priest tank, the threat output doesn't scale enough to keep up with the hardcore DPS at 60, but still good with poorly geared party members at that level. One of the best caster tanks if you spec and gear for it, but definitely something that isn't just a role you can fill without speccing and gearing for it. This one's also going to get its own video. With the Dodge Rogue tank, it's just not good in Classic. The defense values on random greens are indeed 33% lower than I initially anticipated, which makes Dodge Rogue tanking even harder to gear for than normal. No threat tricks have been discovered so far that could help in that regard, although there's hope that the hemorrhage debuff could cause flat debuff threat, which would make it at least viable in dungeons. Please let me know if you can figure this out, because I don't know any hemo rogues on my server, and other scientists are few and far between. On a positive note, Destruction Tank Lock is really good. From what I've heard from all the other tank locks so far, it works and is good in dungeons if you're Alliance and have a paladin in your group. With more fire damage friendly raids coming up soon, I'm sure we'll be hearing more of their exploits, but for now there aren't many raiding tank locks. And with Melee Lock, Firestone turned out to be a bust for the most part, so Melee Lock doesn't pack the punch to be effective in PvE outside of dungeons if you're using the Affliction variation with a 1.5 speed dagger, rather than the staff version with Drain Life. However, Melee Lock has turned out to do decently in PvP. When it comes to building around the crazy Warlock pet tanking threat trick, Fellhunter's Paranoia appears to generate 0 threat, although I can't personally confirm it as I don't have a Warlock with that skill unlocked. If Paranoia does in fact generate threat, then it would be great for dungeons due to the tank basically never losing threat, despite taking more damage than most tanks. However, I can confirm the imp generates the threat, but if the only option is the imp, then we'll need to see that imp's armor values at 60. If anyone has access to those stats, please let me know. And with Arcane Melee Mage DPS, well, despite Arcane Missiles scaling 20% better than previously thought, it's still a very mana-heavy spell because Arcane Concentration only gets 1 chance to proc clear casting rather than the 5 chances to proc that was expected. So Arcane DPS is not competitive. I still think it's alright in PvP because of the pushback talent, and the melee makes a difference there, but it's not much. The Arcane Melee Mage tank, on the other hand, suffers from the same problems, and the melee makes even less of a difference there, due to the glancing blow penalty against NPCs. But it should do alright if you can somehow avoid running out of mana in the first 30 seconds of any given fight. I'll be experimenting a bit more on this later when I get my mage to a higher level. And that's all I got for now. Remember, if you have any information on any of these other builds, please let me know. I'm trying to be as comprehensive as I can. But people are still discovering crazy new tricks and macros and things every day. So remember, whatever you do, go crazy.